Shanna the She-Devil is a very exciting new card coming to Marvel Snap on the 17th of January. She's going to cost 6,000 collector tokens. In my collector token buyer's guide, I actually put her in the S tier next to Dark Hawk. I was torn between A and S, but the excitement I have for this card is immeasurable. 4 energy, 2 stats, of course, being 4 energy. She's going to synergize very well with Zabu, who is currently the best card in the game, in my opinion. On reveal, add a random 1-cost card to each location. So she's 4 bodies in total. You get Shanna in the lane you play her, and then a 1-cost card in each of the 3 locations. I would assume that these can be 3 different 1-cost cards, but in theory, it could be the same of each, but I'm pretty sure it's 3 different 1-cost cards. We can take a quick look at the 2 variants that we currently have access to in the game files. So a Shanna the She-Devil in the Savage Land sort of art style, which you had a bundle of recently. And also everyone's favourite, the Pixel. Oh my goodness. I know you guys are going to be spending 750 gold on this bad gal. Here are all the 1-cost cards, because of course that's going to be a really important part of her. Worth noting, you could hit Squirrel Girl, so board space in that situation would be an absolute nightmare. You could, in theory, play Shanna into 3 Squirrel Girls, which would be 9 bodies plus 1. That would be 10 bodies all at once. That doesn't sound too hot, but that is, of course, incredibly unlikely. A lot of cards are just not doing too much, like Atwa the Watcher. You've got Yondu. Titania could be very dodgy, could go to your opponent's side, of course. The Hood would be nice, unless you play Shanna on turn number 6. Quite a lot of just 2-cost cards, which aren't doing a whole lot of anything. You've got things like Iceman, which can be solid. Ebony Moore could genuinely be very good. 7 points is no joke. And then Blade could, of course, end up discarding one of your cards. Bast as well could be an absolute stinker card. So with the amount of dodgy cards there are with Shanna, I don't think she's just going to be a value card. My gut feeling with Shanna is she's going to be best played on turn number 6. This is also going to play around Killmonger, of course, because Shanna is certainly going to fear the Killmonger. Let's look at some of the key synergy cards. Of course, as mentioned, you've got Zabu, no surprises there. Kazar being the other very obvious one, of course, a 4 energy card as well. So Zabu is going to be very good with Kazar, and your 1-cost cards have +1 power. So with Kazar down on the board, you play your Shanna, and then each of your cards which Shanna spawns get +1. Blue Marvel also solid, but I think Kazar Zabu is going to be the best way to go, possibly with a Moon Girl to get double Kazar. I also wanted to give Absorbing Man a mention as well, because Absorbing Man can copy the ability of Shanna. So you could play Shanna into Absorbing Man, getting a whole bunch of 1-cost cards on the board on the last turn. Particularly with Zabu as well, you could play Absorbing Man, Shanna, Kazar, all on the last turn to just fart out 6 1-cost cards, all getting buffed up by that Kazar. So lots of very interesting synergies potentially there. Here is a look at the deck that I built. This is what I believe to be the best looking version of Shanna. I did have a really long think about Shanna the She-Devil, how to fit her in. A couple of cards in here I'm not convinced by, but we can talk about it a little bit. First and foremost, it's a Zabu deck. It's a very much an all-in Zabu deck. This is the way I like to play Zabu. I got a similar looking list to Infinite this season. The general idea is if you have Zabu, you snap. If you don't have Zabu, you fold. And Shanna is the finishing play in this deck. Moon Girl is going to allow us to copy Shanna. Of course, Zabu making all of our 4-cost cards very cheap. So we would get 2 Kazars, which would only cost 2 each. We get 2 Shannas, which only cost 2 each. 2 Absorbing Mans, which you could, of course, use on Shanna. Also, Wong has some potential with Shanna. You could play Wong and then Shanna into that lane, and you would get even more 1-cost cards. So there's quite a lot of interesting things you can do with Shanna. Certainly does seem like a finishing play to me, to get a lot of surprise value. Again, with the amount of dodgy cards that you can hit, like Bast, could be very risky to do anything else, but this deck wouldn't be too bad with Bast. She-Hulk is the inclusion which a lot of you are going to be a bit surprised by. I think you're going to be skipping quite a lot of turns, so Sunspot makes a lot of sense here. And you can Moon Girl the She-Hulk as well and get to play 2 She-Hulks on the final turn as well. So you could skip 5, for example, and then on turn number 6, you could play double She-Hulk, double Shanna, and a Kazar as well. Well, not quite. You can play double She-Hulk, double Shanna. That will be bringing you up to 6 energy total. So there's lots of funky things you could do with this deck. I think She-Hulk is going to be a nice addition for sure. Just giving you that extra reason to not play anything on a turn. You want to be going into the last turn, losing the game so that you don't get Killmongered with your Shanna. Double Kazar sounds really, really very nice. You've still got the Spider-Man, Absorbing Man combo, of course, to just give you that consistent cube win rate if you don't have the nuts and you don't have Shanna and the Kazar. Similarly, Shang-Chi in there just for a nicer option. Goose should always be good in this style of deck. Of course, not so good in mirrors against other Zabu players and things like that. Of course, there's other ways you could be building Shanna. I know a lot of people are going to be asking, especially like, why not Blue Marvel? Well, playing Blue Marvel for 5 energy when you could play 2 Kazars with Moon Girl for 2 energy each. You can see why I was not too keen on going down the Blue Marvel route, but actually I think that Zabu is just, you just go all in my opinion, on Zabu. That is how busted the card is. We can take a quick look at Marvel Snap Zone, some of the decks that people have been building with this card, some of the other synergies. We've got Kazar, Zabu, Ant-Man. You could of course play some 1-cost cards. I've just put Sunspot in there. I do think that maybe with Zabu you just go all in and you just want to include as many 4s as possible, as I say. Blue Marvel, an obvious inclusion. Again, I think it's a bit of a bait. You don't really want to be spending 5 energy on a card when you can be playing Kazar for 2. Dazzler, which is a new card coming out, which I'll quickly show you because that's coming out the following week, does synergize pretty heavily with this card, although I don't think Dazzler is particularly good. She's also going to cost 6,000 tokens. We're going to take a proper in-depth look at her next week. Ongoing, if you have 4 cards at each location, you get +6 power. So definitely an option. 10 stats for 4 energy. You could put this into the Kazar list. Pretty much, if you just look at this deck, you would get rid of maybe the Wong, for example, and then just slot this Dazzler in. Dazzler looks like very difficult to actually trigger. Get 4 cards at each location sounds very, very difficult. But then suddenly when you think you can play double Shanna, you can play Shanna into a Wong lane, all those kinds of things, then suddenly Dazzler's condition looks a lot easier to meet, and you'll be able to play 2 of these as well with the Moon Girl. So Dazzler does seem like a really nice addition to the Shanna list. Only 10 points though. But 10 points for 4 when 4 is only costing you 2 energy is not so bad at all. Ebony Moore, Jubilee, a lot of these cards just look a little bit wonky, but certainly Moon Girl is the money card to me. Mystique, also worth a mention, of course. Onslaught to get more value off of your Kazar card. But yeah, I don't think you want to be spending so much energy again when Zabu is as busted as it is, and you can play Moon Girl in that deck so very smoothly. I don't really see why else you would do it. Let's take another quick look at the 1-cost cards just to see the overall sort of value you're expecting is 2 points pretty much on cards like Yondu, the Watcher. Of course, you can get lots of bodies with things like Squirrel Girl, which could be detrimental if you play it early, but if you play it on turn 6, you're happy. The Hood would be nice early, but it would be bad on turn number 6. Quinjet could be a pretty interesting inclusion in this deck as well, because the Quinjet would mean that your Moon Girl cards are costing even less. So on the final turn, you could play like Shanna, Kazar, Kazar. You could play an extra card basically, because 2 of them would only cost 1 energy instead of 2. So definitely Quinjet a consideration in this one as well. There's lots of different ideas you can do, but I would imagine this kind of list is going to look smooth. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I quite like the idea of Quinjet. The Wong does look a little bit wonky. It only has that synergy with the Moon Girl and the Shanna. But again, with Wong, you could go Moon Girl and you get 3 Shannas. Potentially, probably your hand's going to be a little bit too full, to be completely honest. That's the other thing to consider with Moon Girl as well, is that if you don't have enough cheap cards, your hand will be full, and therefore you can't actually specifically target the card to copy. So maybe this deck, on reflection, the more I've been sat here thinking about it, discussing, you ditch the Wong, you maybe even ditch the Shang-Chi. Probably we keep the Shang-Chi. Let's just say we ditch the Wong for a Quinjet. Gives us a nice early card to play down. We've got the Sunspot, the Quinjet, the Goose to play before the Zabu. And then by the time we want a Moon Girl, our hand is pretty empty by that point. Of course, the turn you Moon Girl, on turn 4, you can play a card such as Wong and then Moon Girl to empty your hand that little bit more as well. So this looks like the way to go for me. If there's any other deck ideas which you guys have, including things like Blue Marvel, let me know. But again, pretty confident, pretty convinced that all-in Zabu is going to be the way to go for her. Really, really excited for this card. It looks like an absolute blast to play. And I hope you guys did enjoy this breakdown video. Like it if you did. And make sure you subscribe for more Marvel Snap. Thanks.